Okay, I'm currently live. All right, cool. Well then, I hope everybody can hear me because I'm ready to go. It's 7 o'clock in the morning here. Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys are doing all right. My name is Raphael. I'm a lecturer at the Hague University, and today I will present to you the findings of a research that we've done with two other colleagues of mine, Koen and Wesley. On measuring the social impact of small-scale esports events, which is a mixed methods investigation in this case. This whole process actually started with a basic question in our head, right? So we are all like into sports, and I'm very much into esports as well. And the basic question was, okay, is esports sports, right? And then we started sort of asking that question to each other, and we said, okay, you know what? Let's see. We took a couple of definitions, right? And then those definitions obviously kind of like sort of some of them from Dr. Sargeni and more, and we sort of trying to analyze if esports is sports, and then we come to the conclusion that hey, esports is actually sports. And then we said, but hold on a second, if esports is sports, does that mean that it has the same effects as traditional sports, right? So football, basketball, and so on and so forth. And then we started asking questions again. And then we said, probably it does, maybe it doesn't. What's the case? Let's check it out, right? And then because of that, we sort of said, like, we need to explore this further, right? We need to sort of understand what the situation is, understand what the depth is in terms of research for the effects, the social effects, obviously, of esports in this case. And then we start asking questions like, does it parallel traditional sports, or does it have, different effects? Or does it, do esports events foster inclusivity, networking, diversity, and more, right? So some of the themes that we chose, by the way, or not. And then can we compare the role, right, of esports to traditional sports events, right? Can we do that? Should we do that? Is that even, okay to do? And then we were like kind of wondering, okay, but is there a lot of things out there? Well, there are when it comes to large-scale esports events, which are well studied. They are studied in this case, and we could see some of the effects from those large-scale esports events. However, when it came to small-scale local events, right, we felt like it was a little bit unexplored in this case, and we weren't really like convinced that hey, these small esports events, right, the local ones, can actually we didn't really find enough evidence to support that. So we thought, why don't we just sort of start exploring that? Because we thought we need to understand, right, the localized social dynamics that actually exist. Because in all honesty, these sort of small scale esports events create localized social dynamics that actually interfere with behavior at that level. And that's when the journey started, by asking these type of questions to ourselves, by asking these type of questions to each other, but also checking the literature that already existed back then. But what do we know about traditional sports? Because we start, asking ourselves, does it mirror it? Does it not mirror it? Well, we know that traditional sports, right, the events, they strengthen communities and solidarity, they improve health and stimulate economy, and they also encourage volunteerism and civic engagement, right? We do know that. That's been there for a long time. There's research done, and we were wondering if esports events actually can have the same effects. We do believe that they can, but at the same time, assumptions are not something that we researchers are actually good at, or well, maybe we are, but we don't really want to base our ideas and our findings on that. So research is what we want to use to support our ideas. But let's check a little bit about esports and society in this case, right? So it has the potential to become an inclusive environment across demographics. We do know that. However, it can also be a very exclusive environment as well at the same time. So you have to be very careful when advocating for that purpose, right? So it's not like I'm trying to play devil's advocate in this case, but it's just important that as long, as much as positive potential, right, there is to create inclusive environments across demographics, there is also a risk at the same time that can also create a negative, one, right? So we need to have that in mind. It leverages technology and immersive entertainment. It does that for sure, and it does that much, much better than traditional sports in this case. And that actually sort of showcases as well the fact that it can sort of speak to generations that are actually difficult to be located through various traditional channels in this case. And esports can be the one that actually can be the touch point and the bridge between these generations and yeah, companies or products in this case. And then again, it also has the potential to become an agent of societal change. And again, that change doesn't necessarily have to mean that, hey, it is only, let's say, negative or positive in this case. It can be it can have different forms, but we believe that it has the potential to become a good agent of societal change, right? Due to that fact that they have the technology and they can become an immersive entertainment, right? Because entertainment at the end of the day, it should be having a positive effect and a positive feeling at the end of it. So the research aim and our objectives, obviously, throughout that process, which by the way lasted for 2 years, and this is the third year that we're busy with it because the longitudinal study, is to explore the social impact of small-scale esports events, is to focus on the following themes, which was inclusivity, socialization, integration, and networking. Right, those are the 4 themes that we try to understand, and then we did this, right? So we investigated this through mixed methods, which we use surveys and interviews. Which, by the way, the surveys were conducted during the event itself, and the interviews a little bit later. But I will just walk you through that in a little bit. But in the meantime, we also wanted to use a theoretical framework, which was also for us very important so we can sort of connect that puzzle. So therefore, we used the Messi model. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but the Messi model has approximately 10 dimensions right now. It's a framework for societal impact in sports. It's used at least in sports, developed in and we thought, okay, what do we need to do to adapt this to esports context, right? Well, the thing is, the dimensions that the Messi model has couldn't really apply for all, right? That we couldn't really use all of these dimensions for our esports events because simply some of these dimensions, they had different focus, such as social economics or right. And we thought, but we're not doing anything with that, right? Our events are not really focusing on economic growth. Therefore, we sort of left some of these dimensions outside, and we focused on social equality, identity, inclusion, and social capital. Things that actually are part of these small-scale events, because ultimately, social equality and inclusion are very, very important, but identity as well when attending these events to sort of identify and see who you are and if you are a part of that sort of group. And again, the social capital was also a part of it, so we use these ones in this case. And at some point later on, I will also make the connection between this Messi model and the research that we actually used. But all in all, this framework, right, for societal impact, it's actually very handy when you're trying to measure such things in different scale events. Now, so for a mixed methods approach, we had a survey, right? We had 2 surveys in this case with 105 respondents in 2 different time frames. And this year, we are actually tomorrow, we have our next event with approximately, I believe, 200 people attending. So it's going to be a nice event again, and we're going to open again our survey, and we're going to, for a 3rd time in a row, continue our data collection. Hopefully we'll find something else, but if we don't, then we know that time doesn't play a role basically in the data collection, and that's also like a good finding for us. We did qualitative as well, so we did 8 interviews, 7 with participants and 1 with the organizer. What was interesting about this is that we did the interviews later, right? So we had the event, and then a couple of weeks later, we did the interviews. We wanted to sort of understand if there will be an impact, right? If that impact that existed or happened will sort of, transcend and kind of like continue, right? So let's say, hey, did you meet anybody? Yes, I did. Okay, let's see now, a couple of weeks later on, do you still speak to these people or not, right? So we try to sort of understand that from a different perspective, and also time-wise, right? A different time frame in this case. And then we combined obviously the statistical findings with experiential insights, which helped us understand. And I will sort of walk you through that in a little bit right now. So the survey design, like I mentioned already, was at 2 events, 24, 25. The themes that we used for it was the attendance, gaming habits, community and demographics within the survey builds, and the response rate 68% and 57%, right? So it was quite okay in this case. And then the interviews, we had also themes for them. So integration, socialization, inclusivity, and networking. Those were the 4 themes that we had. And per theme, what we did was we had questions. And then according to the questions, we sort of analyzed it later on as well. The interviews were also like transcribed and were done online. So everything was sort of, validated as well at that point. Something interesting here as well is that from these 8 interviews, 7 were with attendees, and then the 1 was with the organizer, because we were trying to sort of understand what did the organizer do in order to sort of create that social impact, right? To focus on that socialization or that inclusive environment or that social capital, right? And then that was actually very, very interesting because we have some cool findings on that. Just some general demographics for you guys. As you can see here, male, they were dominating with 68%, and female with 28%, which showcases that still esports is an environment for, I don't want to say for boys, but mostly for male attendees. But it's changing. It's slowly changing, I have to say, because ultimately 1/3 being female is not such a bad number. Hopefully, in the next event, we'll have more females, but we'll have to see about that. Nationality-wise, we had almost 30% Dutch, and then 70% non-Dutch. In this non-Dutch, we also like know exactly from where they were from, the attendees, but it's mostly European, mostly European citizens. And then the age group. Well, nothing surprising here as well. 17 to 22, 80%, and then 23, 28, 25%. So kind of like what we already know in terms of demographics, with one positive being that the female is sort of increasing slowly, right? So it's not anymore 90-10, but it's kind of like getting almost to equal levels at some point, hopefully soon. When it comes to esports experience and pathways, what did we find here, which was actually very interesting? We found that 75% of pro esports watchers, right, people who actually watch esports online on Twitch or in other channels, are interested in local events. And that's actually very, very, very nice. But we also found out that 38%, so almost 40% of non-watchers, so people who don't really watch esports on Twitch or on other channels, they're also interested in joining. Right, so that's also like, and not just joining that one particularly, obviously that they did, but more events in the future to come. And that's that sort of exposure predicts engagement, and that engagement is kind of like actually what created that that feeling, I would say. And then the perception of esports and community. So events build sense of community. People scored that 4.1 out of 5, which was quite positive. And then it can broaden your social networks. We scored here 3.9 out of 5 as well. And I will tell you what that means actually in a little bit. But we didn't see major differences between first time and regular attendees, right? So people who just came in for the first time to an event or to an esports event in this case, and people who actually visit esports events regularly, which also showcases that probably there's a big chance that these events they're not really, so time doesn't play a role in terms of opinions. And then we also found out that 78% of esports equally socially important to traditional sports. That's what people think. I mean, that's good, right? So almost 80% of the people who attended it, who are mostly, by the way, are not just into esports, they're also into sports. They believe that esports is equally socially important, and 12% believed more important. And then we had also another 10% that said no, it's less important, which is totally fine, right? We're not here to advocate that esports is better or more socially, it should be more socially accepted or better in terms of social equally, right? So importance, let's say, it's more than that. It's more than just competing. We're not competing with traditional sports. We're just trying to understand where we stand in this case. So these numbers help us with that process. Social connections at events, right? So 95% already knew other attendees. So basically, they were either coming with someone or they were just, found someone that already knew in the event. And 70% met new people at the event, right? So, I mean, that sort of facilitates, the social mixing that existed and how people sort of get to know each other and spend time together in an event like that and share their mutual, understanding for the games and also maybe the love for some certain titles that they have. So this is also very, very good to see. And this is where we sort of get more into numbers, let's say. We had some statements and then people had to score the statements from 1 to 5. So statement number 1, which was esports events can contribute to building a sense of community among participants, a score 4.1. So first time visitors and regular visitors, they had the same score numbers. Male and females, we see here that female actually have a little bit higher than male. And then Dutch and non-Dutch, we also see that there is also a big difference. This was a little bit surprising because I was expecting that the non-Dutch would sort of score higher, but it wasn't the case. However, we also run a t-test in this, and there's no significance in terms of statistical data, right? So there's no significant difference in this case. So the 0.4, it's not like it creates a huge difference, but it sort of help us navigate, right, the opinions, let's say, from the participants. The social aspect of esports events is important for your overall experience. And then we see a 3.9, a little bit less than the first one. Again, the numbers are quite balanced in this case. First time, regular visitors, male, female, Dutch, and non-Dutch. We see like a 0.2 difference in some of them. And in male, female, we see no difference at all. During the esports events, you can broaden your network. Here we also see, again, quite high score, 3.9. Same for the first and regular. Almost same for male and female. So female, basically, they have a higher one than the male here. Very insignificant higher one, but still it showcases, and then the Dutch versus non-Dutch, we see a 0.2, which is again, surprising because we thought that the non-Dutch would sort of use this opportunity to meet more people, but instead the opposite happened. And then we'll go to the one that had actually the least one, which is esports events are more socially inclusive than traditional sports. And again, it's nice to mention we're not trying to sort of compete. It's just nice to kind of like see this. 3.5 first time visitors, 3.6 regular male, female, and Dutch and non-Dutch. We see there's a 0.3 here difference, and here 0.2. So those are basically the numbers that we found, and were quite some of them surprising, some of them were not. And then we go to the interviews that we did, right? So in the integration theme, we found out that shared activity fosters social bonds, right, from the interviews. It breaks down social barriers for shy participants, which we did have some. And then it creates an inclusive atmosphere and welcomes newcomers, which it was also showcased by the data previously. In the socialization one, we found that the opportunities for casual and deeper conversations are a thing, right, during the event. The competition encouraged some friendships, and the participants valued low pressure social environment, which actually was very, it was a low pressure social environment because of the way that it was designed. And I will tell you in a bit what does that mean actually. In terms of inclusivity, diverse attendees, right, ethnicity, religion, and gender. And then we also saw like a focus on share play and not differences. And then when inclusive, even in competitive context. And there is a reason for that, okay? There is a reason that it was inclusive in a competitive context. We know that competition can sometimes get the worst out of us because we are competitive people. But it all comes down to how you view it and how you organize it. And then in terms of networking, events as natural setting for connections, academic, professional, and social ties formed during the event, right? So we see different types, different varieties. And then there was an impact that extends beyond event days, which we sort of saw also with the interviews, because interviews were conducted, as I previously mentioned, a couple of weeks later. So the organized perspective goal, it was an inclusive and connection over competition, right? So it wasn't about the competition as much as it was about creating inclusivity and connection. He mentioned the phrase, which was hospitality industry type of event, right? And we all know that when you go out to a restaurant, when you go out to a nice hospitality event, you're probably going to have fun, and there's not much more to that. And connect with people, discuss, have fun, enjoy, share. share and be, the pride and all that. So basically, that helped, I guess. Atmosphere supported by music, food, and casual vibe. So obviously, like diving back into that hospitality thing, right? Some music and food makes everything a bit better, I suppose. And then the prizes were symbolic, right? Not monetary to reduce jealousy. There were prizes, obviously, but the prizes were not focused on money. They were, a trophy and all that. So, which also helped in this case because people weren't really as much, I would say, eager to, hey, I'm gonna win $1 million. That was not the case, and maybe that's actually something to learn from for the future. The synthesis with the Messi model in this case, right? And how does that actually apply? Well, it supported the dimensions, right? So the equality, identity, and social capital, which was sort of then jump back to showcasing us if esports can replicate or the benefits of traditional sport events, and what is the strong potential for social cohesion in this case, right? And in all honesty, with these findings, we kind of say that it does replicate, obviously, and localize traditional sport events, and it has also the potential to even at some point surpass them, if I might say, and I can be a little bit blurred, but we'll have to see about that one. So implications for the esports and the society in this case, right? By the way, I'm trying to sort of be on time because I think I started on 15. So let's see. Esports as an inclusive platform for youth, but at the same time, let's not mistake in this, because the fact that I say here esports as an inclusive platform for youth doesn't mean necessarily that it's only inclusive. It can also be exclusive at times. Networking opportunities are key to community impact for sure, and then esports events can rival or surpass traditional sports socially, which we, at this moment, the data didn't tell us exactly that, but it was very close to sort of understanding that, hey, it's equally important. And that's also a very, very positive message that we received. However, we did have some limitations in this study, obviously, the sample size, which limits general ability. But in the meantime, like I said, we're going to collect another set round of data tomorrow at an esports event with 200 plus participants. And then we're going to see. There was no longitudinal tracking of impacts, right? There isn't longitudinal survey collection, let's say, data collection, because there's like 3 different events and in 2.5, 3 years, let's say. But when it comes to tracking the impacts, that's something that we couldn't do in this case. But it's a nice, it's a nice research for the future where we sort of understand also, hey, maybe a couple of weeks later you did continue speaking to these people, but what about, we do know that in gaming exists and people sort of do that, but in small scale sports events, we couldn't find that yet. And in terms of future, well, we didn't focus on economic effects, like I said, which is also part of the dimensions from the Messi model. We needed larger surveys and multi-theme focus, right? More themes in this case. With that, I believe I'm on time. I have just done 20 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And I have the last one, which are the highlights, by the way, which probably you could also see in the book of abstracts. Esports plays a role in our social circles and can contribute to building long-lasting relationships and friendships. Absolutely. Esports events attracted indecent participants from diverse backgrounds. For sure, as we also saw, there were like almost 70% different backgrounds. Esports act as the catalyst for inclusive environment or exclusive. We are focused in this case on the inclusivity of it, but it can also be exclusive at times. And esports is an inclusive environment for both seasonal and less active players. And this was actually one of the good ones, because not everybody is a good player or a very seasonal player. We also have less active ones. And with that in mind, I am going to this. Questions. I just did 20 minutes exactly. Let me see. Question. On the part of sustainability, what would be the message to city governments why they should support smaller events rather than spend a lot of money on big events? That's a very good one, especially when it comes to sustainability and how important sustainability it is for us here in Europe and how much we value it. And I think we need to understand that small scale events, they don't require people coming from all over the world. and can be, can be facilitated in different environments, different city halls or university settings or existing stadiums, right? And can be particularly attractive for newcomers in different cities, right? uh, we see that immigration right now is sort of a big topic in Europe, and I think we can utilize these esports events, smaller scale esports events, to sort of become the bridge between existing citizens, newcomers, and not so necessarily like that global glamour and global scale that everybody's like seeking for, right? Especially seeing right now happening in Saudi Arabia mostly, which is fine. That's perfect. You can, you have the investment, you can do that, but we also have to consider that travel time. And in all honesty, we've seen that happening with traditional sports as well. So as a sports lecturer myself, I'm not happy with how, for instance, FIFA is dealing with the World Cup and all that, because they don't really take into consideration the sustainability. Because we do know that people will travel to follow these events. However, when the nature of it is a smaller scale, people will think, hey, maybe I can just sort of skip this one. I can follow it online. I don't know. So I think we need to focus more on this sport, on these small scale sports events, to facilitate and use them as the bridge between newcomers and existing citizens. And with that in mind, we will definitely sort of help with the sustainability project that we are focusing for so long now, and reduce that travel. Let me see. I think there's another question. Will the study you run tomorrow adopt the same design? Yes, exactly. We're not changing the design because we want to sort of keep expanding on the database that we already have in a data bank, and that's important for us. So we're going to use the same survey, although we do believe that there's not going to be a huge difference in terms of findings, because time might not play really a role in opinion wise, but it will play a role, but we're not going to test that yet, in terms of the effects. I'm not sure if there are more questions, to be honest with you, out there. That's it. All right. So I guess with that, this is the end of this presentation. For whoever is not available to see it, please have a look at your own time. I'm happy to chat about it. You can add me on LinkedIn, and we can sort of explore the small scale esports events effect.